Alrighty, hello folks, and welcome to the Marshall W. Allworth Planetarium. My name is Braden, I'm a student worker here at UMD, and it is my wonderful job to help run this awesome place. I have a wonderful show for you guys today. That show is going to be called Celestial Gods, which is a show I made. I'm very proud of this show, I won't lie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With that, we're going to take a look-see at basically the origins of all the planet names. With that, we're going to take a look-see at the myths behind, your favorite Roman and Greek gods, Zeus, Jupiter, Poseidon, all of that stuff. It'll be very, very fun. That's going to be about half an hour. That's going to be the entire duration of our show since this is our free Wonderstruck Wednesdays. That's going to be the whole show. Before we do get started, though, I just got a couple of safety notes I got to go over. Number one, it will get dark in here. If you ever have to leave at any point during the show, please exit through the entrance you guys came in. We have glow-in-the-dark tape around the planetarium I'd like you to observe. Please use that to find the way out. Last thing you want is someone tripping and falling on their way to the bathroom, which, speaking of, bathrooms are going to be located on either side of that giant telescope as you saw as you were entering the main building today. You can tell I've given that spiel a couple of times. I feel like I've gotten it down to a science. If you ever have any questions at all during the show, please do not hesitate to ask. That's same for the people at home. We do live stream this show, so questions are on Facebook Live and everything like that. I do have one more cool announcement that I like to say. This is a free show. We have paid shows on Fridays and Saturdays, but next week is my favorite time of the year because it is Dark Skies Caravan. What that means is that the planetarium partners with a bunch of local places all along the North Shore. We take telescopes up and we go just all the way up the North Shore. We look at stars. We do star parties all night. It's going to be really, really fun. The first one is going to be next Monday here at the planetarium. We'll have telescopes outside. We'll be here until about 10 or 11 looking at stars, the moon, looking at stuff in the planetarium. We'll have planetarium free shows in here as well. Please come. I invite you all. It's a blast. But without further ado, I'm going to head back there and get us all started and ready to go. And without further ado, dim these lights down and get started with the brand new show at the planetarium here, Celestial Gods. So, Celestial Gods, the mythology of our solar system. Now, as we're kind of getting started here, I want to say something kind of something that I think is really important when we're talking about this. Most of these gods are going to be from a Greco-Roman perspective, since everything is named after, Greco-Roman gods. The issue when you're talking about Greco-Roman mythology is that you get a lot of stories that aren't very PG, if you will. So we're gonna get a kind of a glimpse as to these stories. They're not going to be the full stories, but bear with me. And we're going to start off with the center of our solar system and a very important god, the sun. He's known as Helios in Greek mythology and Sol in Roman mythology. The word sun comes from the Germanic word sune, and as well as the Greek word sol. But we're going to talk about Helios to start off with. So let's talk about Helios. Luckily, we have a lot of vases to kind of help us show some of these stories. We have Helios right here on his chariot going around the sun right there. And his most famous stories, he really isn't as impactful to most of Greek mythology as you may think. He's just kind of the guy that brings the sun up. And that's really what you get from him. He has two main stories. His first main story is going to be in the Hades and Persephone story, which I'm going to touch on later because it's one of my favorite stories in all of Greek mythology. But essentially, he is the one that tells Demeter about Persephone's abduction to the underworld, thus leading to the actual rest of the story of Hades and Persephone. Later on, he kind of gets wishy-washy in the writing about whether or not he's either a titan or a god, but usually he is more applied to Apollo in Greek mythology these days. Apollo kind of takes up what Helios' main role in the Titan Golden Age was. But there is one story that Helios is kind of famous for, and that is with our favorite unlucky Greek friend, Odysseus. So, in the Odyssey, Helios has a bit of a disdain for Odysseus. Not really much of Odysseus himself, more of Odysseus' crew. Because I like to joke that the Odyssey is essentially just a person getting fed up with his coworkers over a really long time. Because that's what this is. So, Odysseus and the last of his surviving crew land on the island of the sun. Thrinacia is the actual name. And this is sacred to the sun god, and it is absolutely filled to the brim with cows, which we can see in this art depicted right here by Johannes Standus. As we're kind of looking at this, we can see that the cows are chilling down here, but over here they're getting cooked by one of Odysseus' crews named Eurylochus. Now, this is something that was supposed to be a no-no. This was the one time when Odysseus was actually asleep and resting, and his crew decided to do the one thing that they were told not to do. You see, earlier Odysseus had gone into the underworld and talked to an ancient prophet by the name of Tiresias. And Tiresias said this: "You will make it home if you don't do one thing. You'll make it home as long as you don't eat the sun god's cattle." Which we can see they are doing the exact opposite right here. So Helios obviously finds out about this and immediately proceeds to tell Zeus, "Hey, I don't like this guy. Please ruin the next 10 years of his life." And Zeus says, "Okay." So they finally get back on their ship and start to sail out. And not even 10 meters off of the coast, Zeus hits them with a lightning bolt. And they die. Except for Odysseus, who's left hanging onto a craft, wondering what went wrong in his life. And that is mostly Helios' main myth. We're now going to head up to our next planet, which is Mercury. Mercury is going to be named after the Roman messenger god, otherwise known as Hermes, sometimes Pan as well. We're going to touch on that in a little bit. But Hermes and Mercury. Hermes is the most famous Greek god. And if you want to know why I say that because he's a planet, he's an element, he's a tire brand, he's a car brand, he's most hospital logos as well. He is absolutely baked into our modern society. And he is new and old at the same time. The reasoning for that is that very old versions of Hermes see him as this bearded man with this very early version of this Caduceus, and with his feathered boots as well. These boots are also, applicable to many superheroes as well, such as the Flash, Wally West, Jay Garrick, Barry Allen, all of that stuff, all based off of Hermes, essentially. This is an older version of Hermes. This is back more in Mycenaean Greece. But as the years go on, he slowly changes into the Hermes that we know more of, with his actual steel helmet, his wonderful Caduceus, and then still the feathers on his feet and all of that stuff. It changes as Hermes' myth grew, which is that Hermes is going to be one of the younger of the Greek gods. And the myth goes like this. Hermes has a lot of jobs, basically, and one of those jobs is trickery. So when Hermes was born, and on the same day, he was born by Zeus and Mia in Arcadia. As soon as he was born, the first thing that he did was he found a turtle, took the turtle shell and and made it into a lyre, and then proceeded to walk up. Remember, he just got born. Walk up and start stealing all of Apollo's cattle. And the way that he stopped Apollo from noticing that his cattle was gone was that he played a magic trick to make it seem like the cattle were all walking backwards. Duh. Why wouldn't you think that would be the thing that you would do to do that? And then Apollo immediately came down to check in on his cattle and saw that they were gone. And at this point, Hermes snuck back into his baby cradle, which Apollo immediately finds and says, "I can tell you're a god." And then Hermes just goes, "No, I'm a baby." And Apollo goes, "You just spoke." And Hermes is like, "Okay, you got me. I did steal your cattle and everything like that." So Apollo then proceeds to take Hermes up to Zeus to tell him about this whole situation. And Zeus finds this hilarious and actually genuinely points and laughs at Apollo for getting his cattle taken. And at that moment, Hermes then takes out his lyre and actually starts playing it, which that actually gets Apollo on his side, who then decides that this kid's all right after all. And he kind of decides to, take him under his wing a little bit and be like, "You're going to be the messenger of the gods." And Hermes is like, "Okay, that's great." Hermes, though, is a very pissy god. He's the Roman messenger god. He's also the god of roads, travelers, merchants, trade, athletes, thieves, trickery, and brought people to the underworld, as well as help guide people's dreams, and would help aid Odysseus from time to time as well. Because Hermes is actually going to be Odysseus's great grandfather. And we can see this in the Odyssey. This is actually going to be Hermes coming down to meet Odysseus on Circe's island, or Kirke. That's the actual pronunciation. And Circe is this great witch who's really, really strong with magic. And the only thing that can prevent her magic is something called Moly. And Hermes brings Moly to Odysseus, who's then able to do that. It doesn't help too much because he's still 10 years late back to Ithaca, all that stuff. But that is mostly Hermes. But, well, you may be asking one more thing. I thought Hermes was also Pan. Yes. Pan is going to be an ancient, forest deity. He's kind of associated with, very similarly to how, Artemis is associated to. If you remember, I said Hermes was from Arcadia. Arcadia and the kind of Arcadian mountain region, for a really long time, kept to themselves and had some very interesting cults there that followed the god Pan. That actually predates Mycenaean Greece, otherwise known as the time when the Iliad and the Odyssey supposedly took place. So that's what we see here. And he slowly over time morphed into what became Hermes, which is pretty cool. Now let's get into another one of my favorite goddesses, Venus, otherwise known as my favorite causer of problems in the Greek pantheon. Venus and Aphrodite are very interesting in that they are kind of, what can I say? They are kind of, it changes based off of the region. So the one version of Aphrodite I want to talk about is actually called Aphrodite Auraria, which is going to be the Spartan version of Aphrodite, which focuses less on love and more on war, actually, very similarly to Ares, which actually kind of makes sense since Aphrodite and Ares are actually lovers a lot of the time in Greek myth. And we're actually going to talk about her first story, which is her marriage. When she was born, the first thing that she did was she was born, went up to Olympus, and immediately started having, I'll say, extramarital affairs with all the Olympians. Zeus realized that Zeus, being a pretty veteran adulterer, realized that this is probably not going to go too well, so he had to put a stop to this in some way. So he married Ares to Hephaestus, who was apparently the ugliest of the Olympians. Ouch. that sucks. Hephaestus is a very interesting god. He's the kind of the god of the forge. Blacksmiths really worship him and all of that stuff. And this was supposed to keep Aphrodite from, cheating on people. This did not, and she immediately got together with Ares and had a couple of kids named Phobos and Deimos. Her other claim to fame is going to be essentially doing the whole Trojan War, because she did do the whole Trojan War essentially. So we're going to talk about another goddess by the name of Eris, who's actually a dwarf planet that we'll talk on later. But the story goes like this. Eris wasn't invited to a party up on Mount Olympus. She really took this personally. Eris is the goddess of strife and discord. In Roman, her name is Discordia, which is also just an awesome name. I gotta say, I really love that. What is being pictured right now is a scene later on in the Trojan War. We have Menelaus and Paris, and Menelaus is Helen of Troy's real husband, who she chose, and Paris is the guy that just decided to marry Helen one day. Well, not one day. So Eris goes up to three goddesses, Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena, giving her an apple that will basically lay claim to the most beautiful goddess in all of Greek mythology. And they decide that this has to be put in the hands of a mortal to choose. So they give it to Paris, who is going to be a major player in Troy. And he gives it to Paris, and Paris sees all three goddesses, and all three goddesses come up with their own little bargain. So Athena promises great victory in battle. Hera promises that he will be a great king, and Aphrodite promises that he will marry the most beautiful woman in all of the land, which just so happens to be Helen of Troy. Now, Paris is about like a 16-year-old teenage boy, so I bet you can guess the one that he chose. So he chose Aphrodite's, thus the Trojan War begins, and yeah, because when Helen gets taken by Paris, you see, when Menelaus and Helen were married, he made all of the Greek kings sign a pact that if his wife got taken, they would have to go to war with him. So they did, leading to the Trojan War. Now we're going to head to Earth. Earth is going to come from the Germanic word for ground. In Greek mythology, there is a primordial deity known as Gaia. Now, Gaia doesn't really do too much in the mythos. She's literally just a personification of the Earth. But essentially, she kind of gives birth to most of the Titans, which leads to the Titan Golden Age, such as, Kronos, who eats all of his children. Zeus comes out, fights back. They win. Greek mythology goes on. We do have some images of what Gaia looked like. This is a vase with the personification of Gaia, but there really isn't too much. There is also a personification of the moon named Selene. Selene doesn't come up too much in Greek myth. She literally is just, like Helios, is kind of just in charge for bringing up the moon. And that's kind of it. But I felt like it would be not fair of me to not include her, since she is very important in our solar system. Now let's go to a crowd favorite, and that is Mars, Ares. He is the god of war and actually an agricultural guardian in Rome. Actually, in Roman mythology, his importance is second only to Jupiter, Zeus. So he is very important in Roman mythology. In Greek mythology, not so much. In Greek mythology, I won't lie, he's a bit of a joke. His most famous story in Greek mythology, second to probably the marriage, the affair with Aphrodite, is his involvement in the Trojan War. So in the Trojan War, he decides to side with the Trojans. And he really, really, really liked fighting with the Trojans. But there is one Greek hero that kind of fought back, and that is a very underrated Greek hero by the name of Diomedes. Now, Diomedes is very similar to Odysseus in that he's kind of beloved by Athena, and he is just kind of think of him as like a baby version of Achilles. That's what Diomedes is. Diomedes, he is kind of fighting the Trojan army, and he's doing really, really well. And he has this special sight, though, that allows him to see if some people are gods. And he notices that one of the gods there is Ares, and also Aphrodite. So as this is happening, he sees Aphrodite flying away. Athena told him not to fight any of the gods, but then she comes back and says, you know what? I don't like Aphrodite, throw a spear at her. So he does. He throws a spear and hits Aphrodite. This starts to enrage Ares, who starts to run at him. He then takes another spear and throws it at Ares, actually wounding him, who then actually goes back up to Mount Olympus crying to Zeus, who, believe it or not, is not really too pleased with his god of war, kind of crying to him like a little baby. But here is a great image of Ares. He's most pictured in like a classic Roman garb. And here is Athena helping out Diomedes while Aphrodite is running away. That leads us to the end of the what's known as the 4 rocky planets, and lead us to the gas giants, where we meet the big guys in Greek mythology, starting off with Jupiter. And I'm going to show you probably the most accurate image of Jupiter in Greek mythology right here. Jupiter is the Roman god of the sky. You know him better as Zeus. And here is a very accurate imaging of Zeus. Well, I was expecting a bigger laugh than that, but you know, I thought this was very funny. Jupiter and Zeus are going to be the top tier gods in Greek mythology. Interesting thing though, back in Mycenaean Greece, Zeus here was actually not the top tier god. We think of the gods that are the gods of the sky as being like the top dogs in most mythologies. Back in Mycenaean Greece, it was actually Poseidon who is the top god, because it kind of makes sense. Most people are either living in the seas, and at one point, Poseidon was associated with being an earthquake god as well, which kind of makes more sense to worship that guy than the guy who sends lightning sometimes. But Zeus is very, very important, and he does have a lot of, you know, good stories. Most famous of which was when he overthrew the Titans. So essentially, the Titan Kronos, which is the Greek power trio of Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon's father, and he read a prophecy that one of his kids would overthrow him. So to combat this, he thought, you know what? I'm just going to eat my kids as they're born. As you do. So he starts to eat all the kids, but Saturn has actually has what's known as a wife by the name of Rhea, who's another Titan, and Rhea really doesn't like this. And one day, she actually protects one of these children, which is Zeus. So Zeus grows up and grows old and actually gets his lightning bolts and starts to fight back. So he comes up to Kronos, kind of gives him a big punch to the stomach, who barfs out all of the other Greek gods, and who are now fully grown because they grew up inside of his stomach, of course. And they all overthrow the Titan and throw him underneath. But that is Zeus. That is his main story of fighting the Titans. Now, Zeus has a lot of other stories. Mostly him having relationships with people that did not entirely consent to have a relationship with him. So we're not going to really touch on them. But all of Jupiter's moons are actually going to be named after these relationships. So we have Io, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, Almathea, so many more. But we are starting to run a bit low on time, so I want to keep trucking along and head up. Now, to Saturn, who we just talked about. And we can actually see Kronos right here with Rhea. And Rhea is actually currently taking Zeus away to protect him. So we have Kronos and Rhea right there. Saturn has a bunch of moons as well. Saturn's moons are actually going to be named after two things. The original giants and other titans. So we can see a bunch of the giants with Mimas, Enceladus, Iapetus, but we can also see a bunch of the moons, a bunch of the titans as well, with Rhea, which is right there, Dione, and also, well, this one's a bit too on the nose, so I'm not going to point that one out really. Yeah, that one's literally named Titan. It's not up right now, but there's also a great Titan named Hyperion, which is actually going to be the father of someone we're going to get to in a little bit here. But that is Saturn. And now we're going to head to, yes, the planet with the funny name, Uranus. Interesting thing is that Uranus is actually not the Roman name of this planet. All of the other planets are named after the Roman names. This one is named after the Greek name. The Roman name would actually be Chalus. My theory is they thought Uranus sounded more Roman when they were naming this one, so they went with that. I think that's a pretty good theory. Would you agree, Jessica? Because Chalus sounds a bit boring. Uranus sounds cooler. Although, you know, 5th grade science teachers have been dreading this planet ever since it got named, essentially. But Uranus has there's not a whole lot of actual art of him, but there is a bunch of statues. Here is Uranus. He's the father of Kronos. And Uranus, his main story is known as the castration of Uranus. I think you can figure out what kind of happens. He gets castrated. What drops then actually gives birth to most of the Titans. You know, Hyperion, Rhea, Dione, and Kronos. And that is Uranus. And Uranus does have a bunch of moons, but those moons actually don't follow traditional naming schemes. Most of the moons that we've seen are going to be named after what are like characters that god is associated with. But Uranus, actually, their names are named after Shakespeare and Alexander Pope characters. So we have Miranda, Ario, Oberon. We also have Titiana as well. Titania. That's what I'm trying to say. Oh my gosh. Words are getting jumbled in my mouth. We have one more proper planet to look at, and that is Neptune, who I will say may look a bit different now. You're probably used to Neptune being this like deep blue, but recently we found out that those imagings were actually wrong. They were doctored images, and these are going to be the more correct imaging of Neptune. It gets to the same point. Yeah. But point stands, Neptune is more of this like really light blue that I would say. This like milky blue is what I would call. Neptune is named after Poseidon. Poseidon's main story is you know, him aiding his brothers and fighting back against the Titans. We have Poseidon right here. He's the god of the sea. He has that great trident. After they defeated the Titans, him and his two brothers, Hades and Zeus, basically drew straws to choose which realm they would rule. So Poseidon rules the sea, Zeus rules the sky, Hades rules the underworld, which kind of feel bad for him because he's basically running an ever-growing hotel, which is kind of a bummer. But Poseidon's most famous story is gonna be his hatred of our good friend Odysseus again. So, story goes like this. Odysseus lands up on the island of the Cyclopses. He finds a cave with a bunch of sheep, kills one of the sheep. Then we have his Cyclops friend Polyphemus come in, be like, hey, you killed my sheep, my favorite sheep. That's really rude. So he killed 6 of his men, and then proceeded to drink some wine and fall asleep. Odysseus tries to plan a way to escape, so he takes the Cyclops' club, turns it into a spear, stabs it in the eye, and then just takes more of the sheep and runs away. But not after, turning around and screaming his actual name to the Cyclops. This goes down as probably one of the dumbest things to ever happen in literature history, because this literally delays Odysseus getting home by a decade. Because all Cyclopses, at least in this new pantheon, are children of Poseidon, who Poseidon finds this out and decides to ruin the rest of Odysseus' life. And we can see this is directly after Odysseus gets his ship lightning blasted by Zeus. And we can see Poseidon getting really excited to kind of drown him right there. But Odysseus is kind of really awesome dude, so he doesn't really get pulled down by drowning all too much. From there, we head to Pluto. Pluto is one of our dwarf planets. There are 5 dwarf planets, and we're looking at Pluto first. Pluto is named after the underworld god, mostly associated with Hades. And Hades' main myth is the Hades and Persephone myth, which is a very, very long myth. But I'm going to tell it anyways because I love this one. Story goes like this. Persephone is the Greek goddess of vegetation and grain, and she's the daughter of Demeter, who is actually another dwarf planet who is actually named Ceres in Roman mythology. But one day, Pluto sees Persephone out working the garden and instantly falls in love with her. So he goes up to Zeus, Persephone's father, and asks for her hand in marriage. Zeus says yes. This then leads to Hades going back down to the underworld, creating a portal, riding a chariot, kidnapping Persephone, and going back down to the underworld. Yeah, not a great first day as a couple. But as that happens, Demeter, Persephone's mother, finds this out and sees that they're not there, and she immediately starts freaking out. And this is where she's asking all of the gods. Helios then tells her that he got dragged to the underworld by Hades, and she immediately goes up to Zeus to ask what is happening. Because this is essentially an arranged marriage, not like a proper kidnapping. In original texts, Hades is actually not placed blame upon at all. It's Zeus being the proprietor of the wedding. So Demeter starts getting really, really mad at Zeus, who's like, he's a good guy. He has a good domain down there, and they should be happy. So Demeter sends Hermes to go down to check in on both of them. And as they go down, they see both Hades and Persephone out on their throne, and Persephone does seem to be a little bit down. And Hermes goes up and says, hey, your mother is actually kind of throwing a temper tantrum up in the overworld and is actually causing a giant famine. You need to come up and kind of help mediate this. Hades hears this and automatically realizes, yeah, this is a bad thing. We should not have all of Greece die, basically. So he's like, yeah, Persephone, going up. That's a good thing. He does actually make a really sweet promise to her that as his wife, that she will be the most raved upon of all of the Olympians. She will be the most praised and the most worshipped and the best, and that he will do everything in his power to, treat her well. He then, directly after, sneaks him a pomegranate seed, which permanently binds her to the underworld because he got a bit anxious. She goes back up to the overworld to talk to her mother. And as she's talking to her mother, she realizes about the pomegranate seed, and is about to get dragged back down. But Zeus mediates a truce. For about 2/3 of the year, Persephone will be up in the overworld, and for the other third of the year, she'll be down in the underworld, which then leads to spring, essentially. Because when Persephone is up, Demeter is happy. When she's down, she is not. We do have a pretty nice art of Hades and Persephone lying there together. A very interesting thing is that Persephone in actually Mycenaean Greece, very early Greece, predates Hades. Hades actually doesn't really come up until the Iliad and the Odyssey. Persephone is actually in early Greece more commonly wed to Mycenaean Poseidon. So Persephone, and for a long time, was not actually properly named because, you know, being an underworld goddess, that is super scary. And everyone was kind of terrified of this. So, for a long time, she went by a bunch of epithets that actually sound really, really cool. Like the one with many names, and the one who calls, and the one who's last seen, and stuff like that. It's pretty cool in my opinion. All of Pluto's and moons are named after, you know, underworld figures. You have Styx, Nyx, Cerberus or Kerberos, and Hydra as well. And from there, we're now going to get out to our last. We can see a couple of these right here. We have also Charon, who's the river boatman while he's sailing on the River Styx. We have Nyx, which is the divine incarnate of darkness. We have the Lernia Hydra, who's kind of a guardian to the underworld, and then Cerberus, who's also a guardian to the underworld. And now we end off with the rest of the dwarf planets. This is going to be a very, very brief overview. So we have Ceres, who is Demeter, with this art of Demeter right here, who is the god of the harvest. We also have Eris, one of my favorite goddesses. She is just the god of causing problems, and I love her for that. Good for her. Then we also have Haumea, who's actually going to be a Hawaiian god, and she is the goddess of fertility and childbirth. And then lastly, we have Makemake, which is from the island of Rapa Nui, and otherwise known as Easter Island, who is the creator of humanity and a fertility god. And that brings us to the end of our show. I know it was kind of abrupt, but that was an overview of all of the mythology in our solar system. I'd like to thank you all so much for coming out. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask me or Jessica on your way out. As you're heading out, double check you have everything you brought with you: phone, wallet, keys. Anything that gets left behind, I get to keep, so, you know, keep that in mind. And out in our main hall, we have a bunch of star charts that show more constellations and all of that cool stuff and stars. And have a great rest of your night. Thank you.